We go to South Bend, Indiana, site of the first on-campus college football playoff game, Ari. Indiana versus Notre Dame for the state title and so much more, because the winner goes on to play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl.
I love that it's just an Indiana.
It's the Indiana State title game.
Yeah,
it's
the way that everybody
it's the best non-basketball Indiana State title game ever.
So much to find out about this, about these teams in this game. Indiana is somebody who I think the majority of the South is kind of rolling their eyes at their inclusion in the tournament. And Notre Dame has a chip on its shoulder to prove that the NIU thing was a fluke and not necessarily a.
I was going to ask you if you remember that they lost to Northern Illinois, because that seems to be the question I get asked every time Notre Dame gets mentioned. So
yeah. They lost to Northern Illinois.
So
thank you. But I think they both have a lot to prove in this game. And, you know, I actually believe that Notre Dame is a team that could make a run for the national championship this year. I'm not quite sure I'm there with Indiana. So I'm interested to see how this all plays out.
Well, Indiana, the number 2 rush defense in the country, and it will be tested this week, because if Notre Dame is to win, the way they win is they run all over you. Like, they've played teams like Army, like Navy, that had good seasons where Notre Dame just leaned on them the entire game, and eventually the dam broke, and there was nothing that anybody could do. Jeremiah Love, one of the more interesting folks in this game. Let's look at his PrizePicks square. If you're not playing PrizePicks already, what are you doing? The best daily fantasy game in America. Download the PrizePicks app. Use the code STAPLES when you sign up. Play $5, get $50 instantly. You pick squares. You pick at least 2. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. Let's look at Jeremiah Love's rushing yards square. 73.5. You decide if it's going to be more than or less than. I point out to you, Ari, that Indiana has not allowed 1,000 yards on the ground all season. 2.46 yards per carry. It has been very hard to run on these people.
Yeah. And it's like they're just over or underestimated based on our preconceived notions of what Indiana is supposed to be. And of course, what happened against Ohio State is a pretty tough thing to look past. So I'm very curious to see if they can, match that rushing defense statistic against one of the best running backs in the country on Friday.
And the best offensive lines. I mean, and even though Notre Dame's had some injuries on the offensive line, they've got a bunch of future pros that just fire off the ball and over and over and over again and wear people out. We'll see if Indiana gets worn out. We'll also see if Justice Ellison on the other side of the ball for Indiana gets going. His PrizePicks number is 52.5. But I want to look at Indiana quarterback Kurtis Rourke, because Kurtis Rourke had a great season. Transferred from Ohio University, was a great player in the MAC, but was kind of the piece Indiana needed in Curt Cignetti's first season to really get him going. But there's one game in Kurtis Rourke's recent history that stands out. We're looking at his PrizePicks number, which is 203.5 passing yards. He has exceeded that 3 of his past 5 games. The game before last was Ohio State. He most definitely did not exceed it against Ohio State. That was a miserable, miserable game. And I'm a little worried that this may be how that goes. That this defense for Notre Dame plays a lot like that Buckeyes defense. From a talent standpoint, it's pretty similar.
Yeah, and to take into account, too, that he only attempted 18 throws in that game.
3.8 yards per throw.
So, like, part of the way that the game flow went, like, it wasn't like they were in a position where they were just airing it out the whole game. But yeah, it's concerning because there is a line of difference between the teams that Indiana was blowing out and Ohio State, right? Like, they played one team that's also in the playoff field, and in that game, they weren't very competitive. I thought they were pretty competitive in the first half, had some bad breaks, shot themselves in the foot, but they could not do anything. Is that a bad game? Is that being overwhelmed by the moment, or is that a clue of who they are?
Well, and I'll give you a little bit better comparison potentially, or a fair comparison, at least in terms of the defense versus Kurtis Rourke against Michigan, which has a good defense. Michigan's offense is suspect, but Michigan's defense is very good. 2 elite NFL defensive tackles for the Wolverines. He was 17 of 28 for 206 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. It's not the greatest of games, but in this game, that would work. Like, that would be enough.
Yeah. And it's like funny how the PrizePicks number is floating right on that number, because that's
Right there.
Right on that number.
Yeah. So that would be enough. Riley Leonard, the Notre Dame quarterback, obviously is the other side of this coin. I think his rushing number, which is, I believe, 52.5, that's asking a lot, but Riley Leonard has run a lot this season. And it feels like, Ari, he wasn't entirely healthy when the season started. As he's gotten healthier and more comfortable in the offense, he's felt like he can cut it loose, which includes scrambles and design runs. And that's a huge part of their offense, is Riley Leonard beating you with his legs.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has the ability to unlock something really special in the playoff, because Jeremiah Love is also one of the most underrated players in the country. Like, I feel like because Notre Dame lost to NIU, people stopped watching them and aren't paying attention to the strides that they've made offensively. I really think, I do, that Riley Leonard might be one of the best pure running quarterbacks in college football. We just haven't seen it enough, and for obvious reasons. So, like, now that you're in this setting, national championship pursuit on the line, win or go home, you might let it rip a little bit more with that in that regard.
We shall find out. Ari, you and I will be there in South Bend. You guys watching at home, or maybe even in the stadium, play along PrizePicks.